Good day, friends. My name is Justin Waterfield. I work at the Bloor Street Long and McQuaid store. Thank you so much for joining me on this video today. We are talking UA pedals, and Universal Audio has released 3 of them today. We're talking about the Brigade, we're talking about the FLOW, and we're talking about the LA-2A compressor. These are super cool effects to add to your existing arsenal. More colors in your paint box, if you will. UA is continuing this trend of releasing their DSP plugins into hardware format. So UA has tons of great plugins that you use on your computer in your DAW for when you're mixing or recording audio. What they're doing is they're breaking out those plugins into individual stomp boxes. So you can use them with your guitar or with keyboards or bass or whatever other instrument that you're using. This allows you to utilize these sort of esoteric, really cool pieces of gear in different venues and different ways than you would if you had the original gear. So what we have here is the Brigade, the FLOW, and the LA-2A. We have a chorus pedal, a tremolo pedal, and a compressor pedal, and we're going to get into each of these in just a second. One of the questions I get asked at the store a lot is, why wouldn't you just use analog pedals? Isn't analog universally referred to as better, considered better than digital? And my answer is, well, no, not really. I mean, digital stuff sounds great. Everybody knows that, or everybody should know that by now. But what digital pedals allows you to do is utilize these great pieces of esoteric and hard to find gear that these are modeling and use them in a really practical way. For example, the Brigade emulates the Boss CE1 pedal, right? You've all seen the CE1. It's enormous. It looks like a doorstop. It's colossal. It's hardwired with a cable that you plug into the wall for its power. It's just, you would never gig with this thing, right? It's too valuable. It's too clunky and gigantic, and it's just a pain to take care of it. But with this, you just stick it on your pedal board as normal, right? It just looks and acts like a normal pedal, but it sounds and feels every bit as good as the original. The other thing is that it lets you use something like an LA-2A in a live setting. How many bands have you gone and seen live in a club that have, you know, the rack-mounted LA-2A at the back of the stage on top of their amp? The answer is 0, and there's a good reason for it. Who the heck wants to take this giant rack mount piece of studio gear around and make sure it's powered and warmed up properly and calibrated? There's a reason things are considered studio gear. They live in one place. But here, you can take your LA-2A anywhere and use it on just about any instrument. So it allows you a lot of flexibility to get these sounds and textures on your instrument wherever you are. The other question that I hear a lot is, well, if it's a digital pedal, shouldn't it just be like a multi-effects? Can't digital do everything? I mean, yes, digital can do everything, but digital pedals and digital anything runs on microchips, and those microchips have a certain amount of processing power that's available to them. And if you have them do a little bit of everything, that's great, but you're not really using the power that's available to its full effect. When you have a pedal doing one specific thing, you can utilize all that power to make this pedal, this emulation, sound as good as it possibly can. That's the appeal of having dedicated effects, even though each of them is digital. So, on these pedals here, these look a little bit different than UA's other pedals, like their amp simulators behind me. These are the smaller format. These have 3 knobs each, a couple of switches on the back for extra modes and for bypass settings. We're going to talk about those in a little bit. Before we get into any sound demos, let's talk about the signal path. I have my usual 58 Les Paul reissue. I've got some vintage style PAF pickups going on here, going into the Brigade, which is then going to the FLOW, which is then going to the LA-2A, which is going out to the UA Lion, which we did a video on. You can see the link up here somewhere. Make sure you check that one out. That is also equally awesome. And then from the line, it's just going straight into the camera. So what you're hearing is just pedals. No amps in the room, no nothing like that. The first pedal we're going to be taking a look at today is the Teletronix LA-2A compressor. This is modeling a classic studio optical tube compressor, which is to say it's a compressor that sounds awesome. Optical compressors have slower attack and release times than, say, like an FET compressor or a VCA compressor, which means that they don't grab your signal quite as immediately or as suddenly as those other models. This is a very, very gentle massage of your tone. Typically, you would see an LA-2A being used in the studio on things like bass guitar or vocals. I'm going to be using it on the guitar to demo for you today. Let's talk about these controls. We have the peak control, which is basically like your threshold, so the peak reduction, where exactly the compressor is going to kick in, where in the amplitude of your signal is that thing going to grab and start compressing. Then we have the gain control, which is the makeup gain. We have the mix control. This makes me so happy when I see this on compressors. What this allows you to do is blend your dry signal in with the compressed signal. And this lets you do a couple of things. It lets you keep your transients, but it lets you also over-compress your signal while not getting rid of too much of those transients, those little clicks that tell you when a note starts and ends. It's a really, really flexible tool to have on something like a compressor. Then we have the switch in the middle that sets it from compressor to limit mode, basically just changing the ratio of the compressor, like how much it's going to compress your signal once it passes the threshold. We have two switches on the back, one of which sets the pedal to true bypass or buffered bypass. The other one kicks in a modification that some people have done to their original LA-2A units, which is a faster release time. So remember what I said, optical compressors are very slow to attack, very slow to release. This lets you release the compression a little bit faster if you're playing something that has a lot of notes and needs less sustain overall. We're going to try out that feature in a minute. But first, let's just hear what the dry signal sounds like, and then we're going to kick it on with all knobs at high noon and see what happens. Okay, that's a really good example. So it's not even compressing that much, if at all, right? The status light up here when the pedal is engaged actually serves a dual purpose. It tells you how much compression is going on within the pedal. So as you can see, for most of my playing there, it was just on green. So it wasn't really compressing anything at all. It was just letting the signal pass through, but the coloration on that signal, it just adds so much flavor. Like it sounds almost anemic if it's not on, right? Night and day difference right there. So let's twist these knobs and see what else we can get. Compressors are really tricky to demonstrate in terms of like how they sound. I mean, it's a great thing that the LA-2A adds so much character. It's not a transparent compressor at all. So you definitely hear a difference, but the main difference here is the feel. Like you just feel like everything's just kind of glued together a little bit more. I've always said compressors are more of a feel thing than a sound thing. Let's talk about this switch on the back here. So let's kick in the fast mod switch on the back and see if that changes anything. And let's also try the heavier ratio. Really cool way to add some really unique flavor to your tone. Next up on the list is the UA FLOW. This pedal models 3 different kinds of tremolo. There's square wave tremolo, there's bias tremolo, and there's harmonic tremolo. So what are the differences between the 3? Let's see if you can hear the differences as I play through them. So I'm going to start off on square wave. Again, all the knobs are at noon. Let's see what we get. Now let's flip to the 65 setting, which is the bias setting. And now we're going to try the Dharma setting, which is the harmonic tremolo. All very, very different flavors. So let's talk about what's going on. The square wave setting is almost like a black face or silver face Fender. You have a very defined chop, right? So it takes your signal and then just drops the volume and then puts it back up, drops it back down. So if you're to look at this on an oscilloscope, you see it's almost like your sound is being turned on and then off, on and then off, on and then off. That's called a square wave tremolo. Very, very, very choppy. On the bias tremolo setting, which here is labeled 65, This is a different type of bias circuit where components in the amp were turning the output tubes literally on and off, but they wouldn't instantaneously turn on and turn off. They would ramp up and ramp down. So it's almost a gentler wave, almost like a sine wave or triangle wave. This is called bias tremolo. In the Dharma setting, this is the harmonic tremolo setting. What is going on here is the signal is being split into two different frequency ranges, low and high. And they're each being modulated slightly differently and then recombined. And what that does is introduce phase shifting. So things aren't quite aligning, they're not quite modulating at the same time, and that almost makes it sound like a univibe or like a bit of a primitive chorus. That's really where the chorus effect came from, is from harmonic tremolo. It's not really adjusting your amplitude, it's adjusting two different amplitudes, recombining it and introducing phase shifting is basically what's going on there if you want to be a real smarty pants. Let's talk about the controls. We have speed, which is self-explanatory. We have the depth control, so how exaggerated or how subtle you want this effect to be can be governed by the depth. We have a volume control, which is very, very useful. You don't see this a lot on a lot of tremolo pedals, and I've always wondered why. When you're playing with amplitude modulation, it can suddenly sound like when you kick it on, your signal's not as loud as it probably should be because it's modulating so much. So you can compensate for that with the volume control. The mod switch on the back of this governs the tap tempo feature. Get a lot of questions about what exactly tap tempo is. It allows you to use the foot switch to, turn the pedal off and on, but it also lets you set the rate, right? So it lets you adjust the speed without you having to reach down and crank that knob with your hand. You can just tap the foot switch to the tempo that you want, and the pedal will sync up with that. So in a live setting, very, very, very useful. If you need to match the tempo of your drummer or something like that, this is the way to do it. So let's twiddle some knobs and see what other sounds we can get here. I'm going to start back on the square wave setting. So hopefully that showed you how subtle and how obvious you can be with tremolo and how many different types of tremolo the Flow has under the hood. Last but certainly not least, we are going to take a look at the UA Brigade. Like I said off the top, this is a model of the Boss CE1. This is the legendary guitar chorus pedal. It was huge in this huge casing. It had to be plugged directly into the wall. Here we got it in this nice, small, compact format. Let's take a look at the controls before we hear what this thing sounds like. We have the rate. So this is how fast you want the pedal to modulate your signal. The depth is how obvious you want the effect to be. You can have it like really nice and subtle. You can have it really exaggerated, whatever you like. The level control controls how loud this pedal is when you kick it on. The other thing that the Boss CE1 had that the UA were wise to emulate is the preamp that's built into the CE1. And that's what the little mod switch on the back controls, whether that preamp is engaged or disengaged. It definitely adds a lot of flavor, and we're going to check that out in a quick second. The last thing I want to talk about is this switch on the front. It goes between chorus mode and vibrato mode, and there's a lot of confusion as to what exactly each one is. Chorus mode is the dry signal mixed with the modulated signal. That's what gives you the effect of a chorus of guitars. The vibrato side kills the dry signal, so you're only hearing the modulation. And what your ear hears is it just warbling in and out of tune, which can be a really cool effect depending how you use it. So let's see what this is all about. Gonna start with everything at noon. Preamp is off, and we're on the chorus setting. So the short answer is it sounds like the 80s. And you'd be absolutely right. Let's twiddle some knobs and see what else we can get out of this thing. All right, here's where it's going to get weird. We're going to go into vibrato mode. So we're going to flip back to chorus mode, get the knobs to a more reasonable position, and we're going to try this preamp on and off. Now, I should also say that depending on where you've got the bypass mode set, if you're in buffered mode, that preamp stays in your signal even when the pedal is bypassed. So this can be a really cool way to color your signal, but also boost into the front end of your amp. So I'll show you that too. So right now we're in buffered mode, so we're all good there. Let's hear what the pedal sounds like just normally. And with the preamp in. So it's pretty subtle, but watch this. So pedals bypassed. So what it's doing there is it's hitting the front end of the amp, or the amp simulator in our case, even though the pedal's in bypass. So it behaves exactly like the original CE1 in that respect. It's very, very, very cool. Again, thank you so much for joining me on this video today, friends. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out these cool pedals. These are all going to be available starting today at every Long & McQuaid store. So head in there, try them out, order some in, add some flavor to your pedal board. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. It really helps us out. And until next time, I'm Justin Waterfield, signing off.